Welcome to Start Here, a very special mini-series that I have created for you through Sugar Mama's Fire Play. This is our safe space where you can pick my brain, ask the financial questions that you have been carrying quietly. So whether you're feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, or just a teeny tiny bit curious, this is the series where I can give you empowering, practical guidance. Now, today's question comes from a single mum who's using or about to use a debt recycling strategy. And she just has one question before she jumps in. So I'm going to read this directly, this message. Hi, Canna. I'm loving this new series. I'm a recent single mum and I'm about to pull the trigger on my first debt recycling strategy. I've saved $50,000 cash to recycle on my $390,000 home loan. I'll be investing in new LICs, listed investment companies, and topping up my existing 6 ETFs with these funds. Pre-debt recycling, each of my ETFs are automatically enrolled in dividend reinvestment plans. Is it best to continue to do this post-debt recycling, or given debt recycling objectives, is it best to temporarily take the cash dividends to save more cash faster to further debt recycle? My ideal goal is to pay down my home whilst growing my investment assets at the same time. For reference, I'm a phenomenal budgeter and saver and plan to do this with every $50,000 chunk that I save. Thanks, Canna. Okay, so the ultimate question is do I reinvest my dividends or do I use them to help pay down debt? Now, before we dive in, I just want to make a quick reminder that this episode, as is all of my Start Here episodes and everything on Sugar Mama's Fire Play, is always general in nature and obviously for educational purposes only. And I include that when I talk about things that I do that I might share with you. I'm never giving you personal investment or strategic advice. Everybody's financial situation is incredibly unique, and these types of decisions really need to be discussed with a licensed financial planner like myself, but on the basis of personal professional advice through a statement of advice. Also, a debt recycling strategy is one that is high risk and quite complicated. It is so important that your debt recycling strategy is actually set up correctly, the right way, the first time. If you're going to be doing a debt recycling strategy, which I'll explain in more detail in a second, you want to make sure that you have a separate investment loan. You're not saving up money to then go invest. You're saving up money to pay on your home loan to then redraw back through the investment loan. It's really clear that there is a really defined line between your deductible debt and your non-deductible debt. So if you haven't already, definitely go and see a mortgage broker to make sure that this is set up correctly. If you need a great mortgage broker that has done a lot of this debt recycling, including my own debt recycling strategy, just send me a DM and I'm happy to share his contact details. Now, in the meantime, I really want to talk about the pros and cons of each option for this particular listener and to anyone else out there who has a share portfolio, whether it's debt recycling or not, and wonders the same thing. Should I be taking the dividends to help pay down debt, like the mortgage, or should I be reinvesting the dividends for long-term compounding growth opportunities? Well, hopefully this episode will actually help a wide range of people in similar situations, but also different situations. So I'm really excited about publishing this episode for you because I feel like everyone's going to feel so much more confident about what they're doing and what they decide to potentially do or change, but also feel really informed along the way. All right, let's get started by explaining, and actually I'm going to take a few steps back actually and explain what a debt recycling strategy is if anyone needs a bit of a refresher. So a debt recycling strategy is where you essentially convert non-deductible debt, like your home loan, into tax-deductible debt and invest that borrowed money into income-producing assets like shares or even buying investment properties. For example, say I have $1 million home and I have a $600,000 mortgage, so I've got technically $400,000 worth of equity. I would go to my bank and say, look, I'm interested in, borrowing some money to invest, the bank may say, obviously after doing a whole pile of checks and obviously getting a mortgage broker to help me, the bank would then lend me, for example, $100,000. Now that would mean that I have a separate investment loan of $100,000 and I can go and invest that $100,000. But remember, I still have a $600,000 home loan. Now I would make, extra payments on that $600,000 home loan and also service the $100,000 loan. And as that mortgage starts to come down, I go back to the bank and say, I've just paid off another $50,000 of my home loan. I want to continue on investing. They would take that $50,000 from me. So my home loan limit's now down to $550, and then another $50,000 would be available for me to borrow on my investment loan, taking my investment loan up to $150,000. And this is a really powerful strategy that I think more people should consider using in a very slow, gentle, intelligent way, because there's so many great benefits that come from this. But it is high risk, which is why I must stress it must be done under the guidance of a financial planner, experienced mortgage broker, and even an accountant. And the key benefits to doing something like this is it can help you pay off your home loan faster. It means you're actually building an investment portfolio and you're able to diversify out of the family home. Not all your money's tied up in the home. Obviously, you're able to build and create passive income sources, depending on what you invest in. And also for a lot of people, can help them pay off their mortgage a lot faster because they're reducing their tax in a legal manner along the way. So, the ultimate goal is, long-term financial freedom and independence. And, when used correctly and for the right reasons at the right time and conservatively and proactively managed, it's very, very powerful. And if you can reinvest, this can really take your wealth to a whole other level. But of course, this strategy has trade-offs, and the approach that you take has always got to take into consideration your cash flow, your risk profile, your goals, and how much time you've really got. This is not a type of strategy you'd recommend for someone approaching retirement. So, it needs to be done with advice. All right, but let's move on to whether you should be reinvesting your dividends or taking them to help pay down your mortgage quicker. So, reinvesting your dividends can be a really smart move, especially if you're in the early stages of debt recycling. The reason why a lot of financial planners would recommend, dividend reinvesting is obviously you don't have to pay brokerage costs if you've got an automatic dividend reinvestment plan set up, which can be really beneficial over the long run. The next obvious one is the compounding growth opportunities. You're building on the base. Dividends mean that you can acquire more units or shares, which ultimately pay more dividends. So you're actually acquiring more dividend income sources. Obviously, there's the long-term wealth creation opportunities. You're leveraging time, growth, and income to build a really strong portfolio, and you're building passive income. Reinvesting means thousands of dollars in the future in annual income. And if you reinvest those dividends, which I think is a really big one that is undervalued, is there's no temptation to spend those dividends because they're gone. You never actually get them. They're never deposited into your account. They're just put straight back into the portfolio. You could almost just go back to sleep. It's a very passive approach, and your money is really working as hard as it possibly can for you with a dividend reinvestment plan. But obviously, there are two sides to every story, and it's not all upside. So the downsides you need to be aware of are cash flow pressure. You've previously been comfortable reinvesting all of your dividends, but now the landscape is about to change because you're going to be taking out an investment loan, so your overall debts are going to increase. If, all of those dividends continue to be reinvested, you may have less surplus cash flow to reduce your mortgage at the same rate or even potentially cover any unexpected costs. And you've also got to remember in your cash flow, not only are you seeing your mortgage reduce at a slower rate, you've also got to take into consideration you've got to service this new investment loan. You've also got the risk of interest rate changes. If the rates rise again and your cash flow is really stretched, this can become really stressful really quickly. And then, of course, you've got to factor in income tax. Even if we reinvest our dividends, whether we're debt recycling or not, you've still got to pay income tax on them as if you had received them as cash. Now, of course, if you're investing in LICs, you're probably going to be getting some franking credits, which will help a lot, but you need to factor this and budget this into your cash flow so that you get no nasty surprises at the end of each financial year. The other thing you need to take into consideration, and this isn't just a debt recycling thing, it's a general risk of reinvesting, and that is the overexposure. If you are reinvesting back into the same LIC or ETF over and over again, particularly if they have some stellar returns and pay out large amounts of money through gains or income, you may discover that over a period of time, you might be particularly overweight to a certain asset or sector. But this is actually very easily managed by just regularly monitoring and making sure that your portfolio is properly diversified and, matches your risk profile. You also need to remember that this investment loan must be addressed, ideally for most people before retirement. Also, you need to be in a position where your portfolio has grown enough to completely pay off the investment loan, or you're in a position where your own cash flow can pay off the investment loan because you've now paid off your home. And if possible, that portfolio can actually provide you enough passive income. I mean, there are some situations where people have used a debt recycling strategy so wisely that they've managed to pay off their whole entire home, and their investment portfolio has worked so well for such a long period of time that passive income is so great. It actually is cash flow positive to the investment loan that it's attached to, or can in fact pretty much pay off or has already paid off the whole entire investment loan. But again, this is why this strategy is for long-term investors, and it needs to make sure that this portfolio and the strategy is actually working for you. All right, so they're the sort of pros and cons of those dividends. The other idea is obviously taking the dividends now as cash and using those dividends to help pay off your home loan. Now, the benefits. Now, the obvious ones are you're going to be paying off your home loan a lot faster. Instead of just having your own income to help pay down the mortgage, you've now got a second income source, your dividends. So you can potentially save and shave years off your home loan and save tens of thousands of dollars in interest off your home loan, which is really empowering. And then, of course, you've got improved cash flow and stability, because every dollar you repay on your personal non-deductible debt reduces that monthly pressure. And you've also got, much greater flexibility. You can decide when those dividends come in, where does it go? The mortgage, or do you want to top up the offset account or your emergency fund, or maybe you want to go and spend some of that money. You've just got that choice and that control back in your hands. And then, of course, there's the psychological wins. Watching your home loan fall a lot faster than you're used to can feel incredibly motivating and empowering. So for some people, this is a smarter move. But there's also, again, we want to look at both sides of the coin, the downsides. So the biggest one is, and it's obvious, the missed compounding opportunities. You are going to be losing out on those long-term benefits of letting that money grow inside your portfolio. And the portfolio may not actually be where you want it to be by a particular date. So you could actually fall short of your goals when your deadline comes. And then, of course, you've got the disciplined risk. If you see the dividends there in your savings account, there could be temptation to go and spend them on something that is not aligned to your financial goals. However, that can also be managed by having the dividends paid to a separate savings account that is out and away from your temptation to spend. So what is the right answer? Well, here's the truth. I hate to disappoint you, but there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. This is what really matters and what matters to you, and you should be thinking about right now. You've got to stay within the cash flow limits of your life right now. You also need to understand what your risk profile is and how comfortable you feel taking on this debt of $50,000 when you've got a $390,000 home loan and you are a single mum. I don't say that in a degrading way, but you need to keep in mind the stress and pressure falls purely on your shoulders as it would for any single parent. And I know this from being a single parent myself. The other thing you need to have is clearly defined goals that are based around this debt management. You manage the strategy proactively, not passively. So you may need to review and tweak the strategy as time goes by. So what my ultimate answer to you is, you do not need to commit to one decision or the other. There's not just one simple path. In fact, I actually encourage you to tweak and change your portfolio over time. So perhaps you might want to reinvest the dividends for the first, say, 5 years, for example, whilst your portfolio is growing. And then you may want to decide after 5 years, perhaps, to start taking that income to help reduce your mortgage at a more aggressive rate. Or perhaps you might decide, you know what, I can't decide, so perhaps I'm going to take 50% of the income as cash to help pay down my loan, and I'm going to reinvest 50% back into the portfolio. The key here is to always keep it flexible, but to be intentional, and always comes back to your goals, your risk profile, and the deadline for those goals. Always look at doing a stress test before starting. Can you handle, rising interest rates? Is your budget factoring that in? Are you happy to see your mortgage maybe not reduce at the previous speeds that you've seen in the past, because you now have the responsibility of a new investment loan to service and ultimately to slowly pay off over time? Also, have you considered if dividends are cut? Will your cash flow still be able to service everything comfortably? Do you have a plan B? Do you have a plan C? Now, I want to quickly share with you what I do. Again, not as advice, but to give you a little bit of an insight, because I am really passionate about following my own advice. So we have a debt recycling strategy, and this is something I've had for years. I think I took out my first debt recycling strategy maybe when I was 27, and it's something I really works for me. So do I reinvest my dividends, or do I have them paid to the home loan? I reinvest all of my dividends. I don't think I've actually ever spent a single dollar of my dividend income. What I do is I reinvest everything, because my goal at the end of the day is to build a passive income stream of in excess of $200,000 a year. At this stage of my life, my cash flow can cover our mortgage, and my cash flow with my partner can cover our investment loans. I do try and keep all the debts at a very conservative level. I don't try and over leverage myself. I don't try and get greedy. And my priority is to pay down our non-deductible debt first, because that is normally what, for most people, is more financially efficient. However, for some of our investment assets that don't have dividend reinvestment plans, I have actually set it up to pay the income stream to the investment loan. So you could say I have a bit of a blend. So for example, an investment property, you can't reinvest rent. It has to be paid to you. So what I do is I have that rent paid to the mortgage. And so not only is it servicing the mortgage, it's very slowly and steadily reducing that mortgage over time. Because at the end of the day, I want to build this passive income stream, and I want to make sure that I get there at the deadline that I have set for myself and for my family. It definitely is something that I tweak and change all the time. And I'm acutely aware of our mortgage and the importance of paying that off as quickly as possible. So if I get a bonus, or I get a tax refund, or a windfall of some kind, it goes towards the mortgage. Occasionally, I might increase that investment loan, but only after I've gone through lots of different stress tests to make sure it is right for us. But as you can see by me sharing this bit of information with you about our financial affairs, you can see it's not a black or white world. It's a mixture of different things that are always in alignment to how much risk we feel comfortable taking on, where the passive income sources are they diversified, and what is actually going to make us sleep well at night. So, to quickly wrap up, what I strongly recommend is to get expert advice if you're feeling unsure. As I said, debt recycling is a high-risk strategy. You want to make sure that it works for you and it's set up correctly. You also want to make sure that those loans are segmented. You want to make sure that if you get audited by the ATO, you can clearly show this interest that I've claimed is for this particular investment loan. And they can actually see very clearly what is deductible and what is not. You never want your financial strategy to be undermined because it wasn't set up correctly. And another really important point is, have you considered where superannuation fits into all of this? I am not aware of your age, but I know you're a mother and I know you're a single mother. And quite often women, and this is a sweeping generalization, and I hope you don't take offense to this, but a lot of women don't have enough superannuation. So perhaps a debt recycling strategy is great. It might be, right for you. It might be the perfect timing, but don't neglect your super. Your super is equally as important. And debt recycling strategies work best when they're combined with other strategies. Superannuation can be incredibly tax effective. It can be an incredibly powerful way to build up wealth over the long run. Yes, it does come with risks. It does come with, issues where you can't access the money until you meet a condition of release. But the upsides are most definitely worth investing time to consider this as part of an overall strategy. And then finally, make sure you've set some really clearly defined goalposts. Know what they are before you get started with this strategy. Is your goal to build passive income, like $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year? Or perhaps your goals may be purely focused around long-term capital growth. Do you want to get to a certain point where your share portfolio is worth, say, $800,000 or $1 million or $2 million? You've got to know your destination and, of course, what milestones will trigger the actual change in the strategy. So, should you reinvest your dividends or should you use them to pay off debt? Well, as you now know, the answer is it depends. And that is okay if your answer changes over time. What matters is, of course, is you stay informed, knowledgeable, and flexible, and that you are at all times in control of your plan. So thank you so much to this particular mother for reaching out. And I have to say, it's so inspiring to see a single mum taking their financial well-being seriously and being on a path where they are intelligently and proactively and wisely making sure that their money works for them and that they can stand strong and independent in the long run. That is seriously sexy. All right, if you found this particular episode helpful, can you please go and share it with a friend or a fellow single mum who's working hard on their financial future? I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, if you could take a second to please leave me a rating and review, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have a question yourself for a future Start Here episode, send me a DM on Instagram at SugarMamaTV or Canna Campbell Official. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And I promise the moment it is recorded, I will let you know, and I'll also let you know when it's going to be published so that you can make sure you hear it the moment it goes live. All right, remember, your money isn't just numbers. Just like for this single mum, it's her power, her security, and her freedom. All right, everyone, see you next time on Sugar Mama's Fire Play. Ciao for now.